So, good afternoon, one and all. On behalf of Research Committee Sociology of Education, myself Mosam Trivedi, I welcome you all. I am very happy that you all are joining our first lectures of special lecture series through this online mode. I special welcome to today's special guest and our speaker, Professor Maitrayee Choudhuri. As we all know her with her writings, and recently she is elected as a president of Indian Sociological Society. I feel very privileged and honored to introduce her. And I feel in Indian Sociological Society has a very few female president, and she is one of them. So it's very honor to all of us. So you are the first speaker of today's program. Apart from this, she is a very long academic journey. She served as a chairperson of Center for the Study Social System at JNU, and also as a director of Women's Studies program. She is also visiting professor in many international universities like Harvard, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and many other universities. Her writing are mainly on status and issues of the woman. She also writes many books on feminism and gender-related issues. She also edited book A New Era of the Sociology, like The Practice of Sociology, and I say in social science, very few people who know her, but still I try to introduce her in few words. It's not enough for her, but still I just make a try to introduce her. And today I'm very glad that today she talk about the lecture on social science, education, and democracy. Before she start, I request Professor Mohammad to say a few words for this event.
Thank you, Dr. Mosam Trivedi. It's really a great opportunity to speak from this platform where a doyen in academics and of course none other than the President of Indian Sociological Society, Professor Maitrayee Choudhuri is present. Friends, as you all know that the research committees are considered crucial operational wings of the Indian Sociological Society for all its research and professional activities. Of course, they are organically linked. In fact, there are the guiding principles and rules formulated in the way of governance of these research committees in order to streamline the functioning of them of making them more effective and useful. Friends, besides these RCs should play the role of intellectual academic leadership to orient our disciplinary practices towards national and international trends and debates in the specializations that we are representing. Also, it is stated that the research committees are academic arm of the Indian Sociological Society and that they have to ensure that their meetings create an intellectual debates, dialogues on the issues that are germane to the specializations that they represent. Friends, in response to all this, and in response to the recent mail from the President of Indian Sociological Society advising all the conveners to organize minimum 1 or 2 lectures or talks every month, we got into this mission, and as stated while presenting the report of the research committee 5 in the recent past, that we decided to start this series with Professor Maitrayee Choudhuri herself first. And friends, we know how busy Professor Maitrayee Choudhuri will be, and thus I had found her to be thoroughly occupied this month. But somehow I prevailed upon her to clinch today's date for this talk, and of course I troubled her by deviating her from her busy schedule, and with these few words, friends, and I invite you all to this interesting topic today. To place it that I have received immense, marvelous moral support from all the members of the RC5 Sociology of Education, particularly Mosam, Professor Nagaraju, Professor Rajesh, Dr. Narmad, and also my co-convenor uh, of this RC5. We all are thankful to Professor Maitrayee Choudhuri for accepting our invitation and agree to deliver the. I welcome you, madam. Thank you so much. I welcome you for this interesting talk.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Dear colleagues, at the outset, I want to convey my sincere thanks to Professor Mohammad, the convener of RC05 on Sociology of Education. Thank you, Dr. Mosam Trivedi, for your generous introduction. I am really indebted that you took this initiative to start this series of lectures, oblique talks on the theme of the research committee. As Professor Mohammad has already mentioned, research committees are the foundations, the building blocks of a professional body of sociologists who we, like all of us, are primarily academics, either teachers, researchers, students. This is critical. Strong research committee, active academic and activity in the research committees are central to building up the Indian Sociological Society and strengthen an already strong ISS. Thank you, RC05. Thank you, Professor Mohammad. The reason that I was very keen that this series begin is to communicate to our younger scholars that it is the conferences are the end result of 1 year of hard work that all of us put in. But right from the beginning, it is important that we engage with the theme of the conference. And the theme, this can become also a forum which can work as a mentoring forum for helping, sharing a material that each of us have on education. All of us are specialized, limited in our own fields, but when we share, we grow in strength. We can look in, we can advise, we can suggest readings. I'm also thinking about suggesting the possibility if we can put up a bibliography of essential writings or readings against the RC, depending upon the theme of the RC. This again would be very, very useful for scholars, both young and old. As has already been mentioned, the topic that I've chosen today is social sciences, education, and democracy. What I have to say is nothing novel, nothing new, but it does reflect a concern that we all have about the decline of the social sciences and its relative marginalization in some contexts and a kind of reinvention of the social sciences in some instances. My objective here is therefore to emphasize why we must have a robust social science curriculum and how the social science curriculum is fundamentally linked to liberal education, democracy, and social justice. Education in modern times is fundamentally different from education in pre-modern times. When we, as students of sociology, begin any textbook on sociology, we often refer to three moments in history which have had a defining influence on social sociology in particular. The three events that we mention is the Enlightenment in the West, which brought in the whole idea of a reason-based education, possibility of critique, the possibility of realizing that education is something that can lead to a better and a more just society. Not surprisingly, the second event that we often mention when we talk about the emergence and growth of sociology is the French Revolution, with the cry of liberty, equality, and fraternity. So the idea of reason-based, a scientific approach, a critical approach to the social world is very linked to the idea of democracy and social justice. As you all know, in traditional society, in pre-revolutionary France, which was a very unequal society, the aristocracy was entitled to education. Much of the peasantry, the serfs, were not. The cry of everybody being equal was raised during the French Revolution, and this democratic revolution spread to all parts, including to colonized India, which raised the question, if democracy is about equality and freedom, why are we unequal? So if the first was enlightenment about a certain approach to education, the second was the idea of French Revolution, and the third was the concerns and the transformation which industrial capitalism brought about. That too is very, very central in our country, even today, or even in the globe, because globally we continue to inhabit what is called a neoliberal stage of capitalism, where even education is very unfortunately seen as yet one more commodity in the market. So when we talk about revenue models, whenever a university now is instituted, they have to share their revenue model. How much profit would they be able to gain? And are they self-sustainable? Not only self-sustainable, do they have a profit that they can acquire? It is in this context we need to look back at the social sciences, its relationship to education and democracy. I will begin on a more biographical note. My interest in understanding the relevance of social sciences and humanities in general, and sociology in particular, the discipline I'm trained in, has stemmed in a major part from my own experience. As a young woman student, my choice to do first English literature and then sociology appeared natural. These subjects, it was widely believed, were what young middle class women ought to be studying as time passed until they got married. Neither subject was seen as having any necessary connection with serious employment possibilities. When a young man would make a similar choice, either to study English literature or sociology, he would be expected to offer some explanation. My specialization in women's studies later in life likewise evoked no surprise. The fact that I was woman was explanation enough. In other words, the point that I'm trying to convey to all of you is there are some self-evident, taken for granted, gendered set of ideas about academic disciplines that circulate in society. So if a nephew says, I'm doing computer sciences, all of us look at him in appreciation and admiration. If somebody says they're doing sociology, people are not too sure. They may ask, are you planning to sit for the UPSC? Or they may ask, will you do management later? What will you do? Suggesting that the sociology itself is not a subject worth being studied for itself. It's also seen as an easy and usually a last option. The brightest students, therefore, do not opt for them as they are worth little in the job market. Social sciences, therefore, are graded poorly in terms of prestige and influence, unlike natural sciences and more recently finance or management or economics. Were these views which I'm sharing unusual, I would not have begun on this note. But I'm beginning on this boat because these ideas of not being relevant enough, of not being employable enough, is widespread, not just among lay members of society, but also experts, policymakers, state, market, international institutions. This was particularly true in the context of globalization. At the time in the 90s, when the World Bank and other international institutions suggested that, look, if social sciences have to be relevant, they have to move towards an applied mode. Here, too, there was a hierarchy. Just like there is a hierarchy between subjects which men are supposed to study and subjects which women are supposed to study, there was a hierarchy about the social sciences that the global south should do and the social sciences that the global north should do. So I remember writings suggesting that in African countries or Asian countries, they should not pay too much attention on theoretical questions, philosophical questions. They should apply their mind and their resources to solving of particular problems. How should a bridge be built? How should water be supplied to a particular village? These are important questions. They are important to look at. But does it mean the theoretical, methodological idea of social science is not considered relevant at all? I want to argue that this is not true, that our relevance is different from other kinds of subjects. And I want to very briefly touch upon COVID, which we are fast forgetting. During the pandemic 2020, we often heard about people who are frontline workers. So doctors were frontline workers, health practitioners were frontline workers. Where did we sociologists figure in? Where did social science figure in? We were not frontline workers, but did it mean that we were not relevant? Because even during that period of time, you remember there were debates about how even the response to pandemic was linked to questions of race, ethnicity, religious polarization. When there were ideas that COVID came from China, there were attacks from people from northeastern parts. Then there were attacks suggesting that particular communities were bearers of COVID and were spreading it. So in a society which is unequal and divided, very often, even a pandemic has social science dimensions. We knew about racial attacks in the global north. We had heard about it all. We also learned post-pandemic that during the pandemic, the age of girls getting married had sharply dropped. Rate of girls dropping out of schools or even young boys from school had increased because the pandemic had increased and heightened existing inequalities. In other words, yes, we are not frontline workers. We are not expected to provide deliverables, 1, 2, 3, but we create body of knowledge which helps towards a better, just society, even perhaps delivery of health practices can be done better if we take social sciences here. There are broadly 3 parts in which I wish to divide my lecture. Part 1 wants to look at the existing poor state of social sciences and the need to address this. Part 2 on the specificity of social sciences and sociology, and I argue that the tendency to measure it on similar yardsticks as natural sciences, it's faulty and it needs serious interrogation. Part 3 revisits debates about the purpose of a university in a modern democratic society and questions the term use, role, relevance of sociology in this practice or in this context. The first part, the state of social sciences. All of us know that we are very poorly regarded. Few would take us as a kind of role model. My argument is that the condition of the social sciences do not stem from the fundamental nature of social sciences. It stems from the way we practice it. It stems from the way we teach it and our understanding of social sciences. Unfortunately, policymakers often take the faulty practice of social sciences as intrinsic or natural to social sciences. The criticism is not, therefore, leveled at the way social sciences are practiced, but at social sciences per se. For example, a lot of people will say that what is the point of taking sociology or social sciences seriously? There is no need to understand it. When I was involved in writing the textbook for NCERT in 2005 onwards, very often I discovered that teachers of sociology in many schools were not sociologists at all. They were people who could be physical trainers, they could be people from biology. The assumption was that sociology did not need any specific training. It did not require, it was easy. It was simple. All that it was required is memorizing, confirming the idea of what we call the banking model of education. Define A, define B, tick, and the multiple question system now, which has become in vogue, aggravates this banking model of education. when we have to tick A, B, or C, what it does is it hollows out social sciences. So I would try to argue that we first must accept and recognize that the quality of social science education is poor in most parts of India. It equips students with neither tangible basic skills, and very often, as you know, the NEP has rightly addressed the question of skill enhancement. But my argument is that what are skills? What are the skills which social sciences ought to know? And I would argue that the social science skills are careful reading, writing, interpreting, counting, tabulating, critical skills of comprehension and analysis, and ability to look behind the facade, to recognize fake news as fake news. Because as sociologists, as social scientists, we know that knowledge production does not happen in a vacuum. Knowledge is produced, constituted, deliberated, and disseminated in a particular fashion. Social sciences teaches us to look at each particular phenomena in a critical fashion. Not surprisingly, therefore, in the anti-colonial movement against British colonialism, not just in our country, but in the anti-colonial movement in Africa, Latin America, and all the countries which resisted colonialism, the importance of a literate middle class was extremely important. It's not that the peasantry, the working class were not involved. It was not that the illiterate had not sacrificed enough. But reading, writing gave the opportunity for the middle class to look at the West and say that you say everybody is free. Why are we not free? It gave the opportunity to social reform thinkers of the 19th century to look at the thinkers of liberal democracy in the West. Not surprisingly, if you look at anybody in the 19th century from any region in the country, any community, they were familiar with Bacon. They were familiar with all kinds of philosophical writings which were emerging in the West, just like they were very familiar with critical traditions in our own country and very aware about what should be criticized within our societies and what should not be criticized, what should be criticized in societies abroad. And the criticism did not stem from the idea of who we are. It did not mean that all that we did was necessarily good and all that the others did were necessarily bad. But we justified it, scrutinized it on its own merit, a tradition from the Enlightenment, on its own merit. Did this practice help our society to become a more just society? Does the restriction of education to young girls, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? How do we judge it? Not by authority, not by invoking authority and saying, look, so and so has said this or so and so has not said this, but saying that this will exclude some sections of society. It's important to bring them in. Therefore, we have to understand this value of social sciences for a democratic and just society. Very often we find that when there is a certain crisis, maybe sexual violence, maybe violence against women, maybe ethnic conflict, maybe a certain kind of caste violence, then we say, let's have sensitization courses on gender, sensitization on class or caste or communalism. My argument is that if we took social sciences seriously, we would not need these sensitization courses. Social sciences would afford us and offer us a comparative perspective, a historical perspective, which would teach us the difference between a just society and an unequal society, or an inclusive society and an exclusive society. Importantly, one of the reasons for the decline in the quality of the social sciences is the idea that you should make everything easy, that people don't understand, that people who speak about quality are necessarily elite. I would argue that people who argue that people don't understand are actually being elitist and restricting knowledge to the wider community. Everybody understands if language is a barrier, we should focus on translation. State has its own translation vision. The Indian Sociological Society should also forthwith help in translation of good quality text. Because as Sharmila Rege had mentioned, there can be no equality without quality. There has to be quality if we have the idea of equality. We have to also bring in the idea that we have to have a necessary standardized model of evaluation in social sciences. One of the reasons for the decline of standards, if you wish to use that particular term, in social sciences, that you have to have standardized marking. Now, the whole logic of social science is the possibility of raising new questions, breaking away from the banking model and approaching it from a more dialogic model. We need to therefore break away from a social science, which examples from. Am I audible? There's some disturbances. Yeah.
Please
If
mute
I'm
yourself, please.
There are certain mics on. So I put the request kindly unmute. There are certain mics on. Please unmute. So there is a lot of noise coming. Yes.
If someone doesn't, then we can.
Srabanti, and there is one more mic which
No, I have done just now to say that a lot of sound is coming. My mic had been off from the very beginning.
No. I know Shaila is there, and there is one more person. So I was just trying to figure out the names. It's not now. Still there are voices
This is
coming.
just a request. Please, all of you mute the mic because we are recording this and this would help us a lot. Thank you. Yeah.
Person is not even aware that his mic is on.
Is there any way to mute it? Mute everybody?
Admin can do that.
Admin can remove.
Admin can do that. Please do that.
Yeah.
And you can remove them from the meeting.
Don't remove. That's not good. Unmute. Mute them. Let's mute them.
नाही मग त्यांच्या गाडीत पोलीस राहतात त्या गाडीमध्ये त्या इव्हेंट
I
मशीन
think it's
राहतात
Rajesh, Pradeep, they can
आम्ही
check
काही
them
माहिती
out.
बी नाही पहिल्यांदा झालं
I think he doesn't know.
The office to mute everybody except the speaker. Yes. Now, point that I was just to quickly repeat because we've had a break. There were three parts to my argument. One is that the state of social sciences is in a state of decline in many parts. We have reduced it to a kind of standardized format, a standardized format where we have given up the critical perspective and have moved increasingly to a rote model, a banking model. We have an evaluation practice about the multiple choice questions, which again encourages people to move towards a rote model, which is actually in contradiction to what the NEP is talking about, a critical approach of classrooms being energizing thinking boxes. So we need to look into each of this. We also need to take a concerted effort, each one of us, research committees, Indian Sociological Society, to ensure that there are some good texts which are translated, because we cannot have any equality without quality. Equality without quality does not mean anything. In fact, it deprives and denies the equal right to the best of education. There is another tendency which happens very often in sociology, the obsession with definition. That when you say define so and so, and if you're able to repeat what a definition is, the assumption is you understand the phenomena. But you may correctly write the definition and still not understand it. And this particular problem is not only something which haunts us in India or haunts sociology, but has been a fundamental problem with many subjects. And I want to quote from here, even by people who do the natural sciences, and this is a quotation about how do physicists, people who do physics, define the concept of length. And I quote from Herbert Marcuse's discussion on the concept of length, where he quotes Bridgman and says, "It is assumed we know what we mean by length if we can tell what the length of any and every object is. And for the physicist, nothing is more is required. To find the length of an object, we have to perform certain physical operation. The concept of length is therefore fixed when the operations by which length is measured are fixed. That is, the concept of length involves as much and nothing more than the set of operations by which length is determined. That means the concept is synonymous with the corresponding set of operation. For example, if we say dropout rate of young girls from primary school, we measure dropout rate. We measure it, we operationalize it, but we don't go into the questions about how did this dropout rate take place, what are the social contexts within this, how is it related to other facts here. That is, we do not have a holistic and an analytical idea. Instead, we sort of operationalize it to its immediate application. Methodology, therefore, becomes application of methods and techniques. For example, if you say, look, crimes increase with urbanization, and we will keep collecting data to show that correlation. But this correlation is not enough to explain either urbanization or crime, or more fundamentally, what we consider a crime to be. Is rape a crime? At one point, it was not considered. Legally, it is a crime today, yet across society, very often, they do not feel as strongly about rape as they may be against another particular kind of crime. We have to understand the social and differential perception of crime. Maybe as sociologists, we need to go back to Durkheim and look at his interesting idea about crime. Now, my argument was that very often policymakers take the present condition of social sciences to be the nature of sociology or the social sciences. So they make recommendations, but these recommendations do not fit in because they are one fit solution. For example, does the entry of semester system, grades and credit choice is something which will solve all our problems? Is a centralized admission process going to solve? These are administrative important intervention, but these interventions have to also stem from an actual understanding of the social context within which education takes place and within which people's idea of social sciences take place. The other argument, the second point that I wanted to argue, that social sciences are not poor cousins of natural sciences. It's not like saying, like today we do not have any exact data, or we are not as accurate as the physicists or chemists, but we will slowly become. That, I think, is a wrong model. We are not poor cousins of natural sciences. Our very practice, our epistemological assumptions are different. Our methodological approaches are different. We as human beings are constitutive in society. What I mean by that is I belong to this society. I am a sociologist, but I also belong to a religious community. I also belong to a class. I also belong to a caste. I belong to a ethnic community. I speak a particular language. I've had a certain kind of upbringing. I am part of the society within which I am located. I, as a human being, already have ideas about society. And this is a point that all sociologists and sociologists of education have to look into very, very carefully. The distinction, which in sociology we say is the distinction between common sense knowledge and sociological knowledge. Distinction between knowledge by acquaintance and knowledge acquired. Otherwise, very often what happens is my ideas, my general ideas, my views on religion, family, caste, community, state, market are considered sociological. Whereas sociological knowledge has to be based on certain kind of evidence-based theoretical premises. Durkheim had mentioned in his Rules of Sociological Method, this is a challenge. This is a challenge. And those of you who are familiar with Rules of Sociological Method would remember he said that when you start studying a social phenomena, get rid of presupposition, get rid of idols. In other words, he says, we already have ideas about society. He mentions in his writing that, look, human beings did not wait for sociology to arrive to have ideas about religion, nationalism, society, kinship. law, order, crime. No, human beings already have ideas, but human beings are cognitive human beings. Human beings are feeling human beings. They have their language, they think, they're socialized in a particular fashion. But this education is got from parents, family, children, ethnic groups, community. They are not validated. They are very often similar to presuppositions about other communities. They are taken for granted. Unlike the Enlightenment credo that you must question doesn't happen here. You say, I believe in this because my community believes in this. Whereas when we talk about sociology, there are two aspects. One is that everything is not evident at the surface. Many things are hidden, and we have to have a critical outlook and a method and a theory to have a continuous criticism of all extant theories of society. Here I'm quoting from Bottom's famous sociological textbook of 1975, that a critical outlook involves a continuous criticism of all extant theories of society, including those everyday conceptions of the social world which shape practical life. It is the spirit of continuous questioning that is common to sciences, physics or sociology. It is the spirit that imparted sociology, what Bottomer says, a radical and positive approach. If there is much that is common to natural science and social science, there is much that is different. Social sciences, culture is a central theme. In social sciences, facts constitute constructed meanings, which can only be deciphered with the help of those who construct the people. And here I give an example. Many of you have heard me before, may have heard this example before, but this example is real. The example of how do we define work. You know that in 1974, we had the text towards equality, 75, you had the International Women's Decade. And scholars post 75 felt that the Indian census did not rightly represent the data on women workers. There was very few women under work. And they started asking the question, why? Were they deliberately missed out? And then they got on to the question, how was work defined? A theoretical question, a methodological question. And they found out that work was defined by only organized work, regulated work, which was legally defined with regular 9 to 5 work, regular pensions, etc. So you realize even in the census, which is only about numbers, the categories are concepts, and those concepts have to be understood, interrogated, questioned to find out who constituted that work. So the difference is fundamental in the social science. The sociologist is not studying an entity which is outside the world. Everything, caste, class, race, nation, caste, ethnicity, even age, gender, everything matters because we are already located. How do we get out of what very often young students say is bias? I would not like the word bias. I think the whole issue is if we take sociology seriously and look at social science concepts in a critical fashion, we don't have to get rid of a bias, so to say, but we have to look at these concepts in the fashion that they have been constituted in society. We have to take sociology of knowledge seriously. As Piero Bourdieu states, sociological language cannot be either neutral or clear. The word class will never be a neutral word so long there are classes, nor can the word caste or neutral or race be neutral so long as there are caste or race inequality. Social science is not just a scientific activity, but a critical and even a political activity. And without theory, we cannot pursue meaningful and critical sociology. Before I finally come to the third part, I just want to mention a very interesting concept which Anthony Giddens has pushed into this debate of social sciences, democracy, human beings, and knowledge. Double hermeneutics, double hermeneutic. What does it mean? It means the subject of study in the social sciences are, like human beings, are concept using beings. That each of us use concepts every day. In our own families, people will get up, they will discuss election, they will discuss Trump, they will discuss American election, they will discuss war, they will discuss rate of divorce. All of us, whether we are sociologists or not, are using concept. Since many of these concepts in sociology also filter down in society, ordinary people also start using them. death rate, patterns of birth, marriage, family become part of the constitution of modern society. Minorities, majorities, statistical figures, election debates become part of it. What we contend the findings of social sciences become very often part of our society, become part of it. So unlike the natural sciences, our findings are not radical. We do not create rockets. We do not create vaccine. But as the data on vaccine shows, it's more than a scientific invention or a medical invention. It is located in the political economy of the pharmaceutical industry. It is located about who got to be vaccinated, who did not. There are issues of political economy. There are issues of differential access. There are issues of control which takes place. So in a certain sense, we have to understand that we as concept-bearing human beings, that is thinking human beings, need to look at each of these concepts very, very carefully. Interestingly, the social sciences have been reflexively involved, making us understand our own society in a very fundamental way. Look at the debate on democracy. Some people would argue that if you have elections, that is suffice to have democracy. Others would argue that you have to have constant engagement, freedom of press, freedom of thinking, freedom of expression, freedom of language, freedom of religious beliefs for us to be actually democratic. Now, each of this concept, even democracy, is a social science concept. We have to look at its history. We have to see how it has been traveled. We have to see how it was played out in other societies and how it has played out in our society. Each of this will make an important role in how we look at social sciences in a much more engaging, interrogative, and empowering fashion. We must break away from the idea of sociology or social science only as definitional questions, but we have to inculcate the idea which Peter Berger says the sociologist is a spy. He gives the analogy that the sociologist is like a spy. The job of a sociologist is to report as accurately as he or she can about a certain social terrain. We must be fearless, even if I don't like what my findings, maybe the findings that I do in a particular study is not conducive to my own ideological belief, does not matter. As a good sociologist, I must produce that data because only good data can counter false data. Only good information can counter bad information. It is extremely important, therefore, in the current context, to go back to the basic role of social sciences and the role of social sciences in our university system. Because in our university system, it is important for us to realize, to quote the first Prime Minister, the university stands for humanism, for tolerance, for reason, for the adventure of ideas, for the search of truth. If the universities discharge their duties adequately, then it is well with the nation and it is well with the people. And this role can only happen if we study social sciences, if we study history, if we study political science, if we study literature, comparative perspectives, if we study philosophy. Not surprisingly, the IITs, when it began in the 1960s, or the IIM, always had departments of philosophy, humanities, English literature, sociology, because they realized that if you want discerning citizens, thinking citizens, not just thinking citizens, but employable skills, then we have to have a social sciences which produces people with both analytical abilities and actual skills which give them jobs in the state and in the market. I will stop here and thank you very, very much once more to the RC05 for allowing this possibility. I really hope that the year ahead we have various scholars who would give lectures here, and perhaps the RC could think otherwise of more innovative ways of also using this particular space. Thank you once more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really very great lecture, thought-provoking lecture. Before going to question and answer, I request Professor R. Rajesh to say something, few words about the lecture.
I think Dr. Mosam will take it up. He will say after the question and answer session.
Okay, ma'am. So, anyone who wants to ask some questions, please unmute yourself and ask.
Good afternoon, ma'am. And first of all, I would like to congratulate Mohammad sir for organizing this wonderful session. I also extend my warm wishes to you to elect as the chair, president of ISS. I am meeting virtually with you first time. Madam, regarding this NEP 2020, actually they are saying about a multidisciplinary approach. As per my knowledge, so this sociology can be utilized for personality development at the individual level. So why can't we ask the government from ISS side to implement this sociology for sociology of India, or maybe something like at least 10 chapters, like what is caste system, what are the major issues of social issues of in India, and and how to overcome it. At least because most of the engineers nowadays, or maybe doctors, they are unaware of what is the complexity of society. So this will help them to understand what is the society, what is caste system, and how to. If interestingly, majority of the higher education institution, we find this ragging culture as well as the something what kind of atrocities, all these are happening there. Something like caste discrimination. To overcome all this, why don't we use this sociology as a student mold? Even the NEP 22 has also suggested lot of social values should be inculcated among the students. So this subject will be better to opt that one. So as from our ISS side, why don't we ask the maybe the UGC side to implement this as one paper, at least to throughout their year, in anyone, maybe the first year or second year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I too have a question. Can I ask?
Yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
Yes. I'm Dr. Srabanti Choudhuri, Assistant Professor in Sociology, School of Social Sciences, Netaji Subhas Open University, Kolkata. Madam, it was enriching and an extremely enlightening lecture for us because you were making us travel through the crooks and crannies of social sciences, the dynamics that it has. My question is, yes, at times it becomes difficult for us to differentiate between common sense and social science concepts. Sometimes because, as you said, that other people who live with us without the sociological domain of knowledge, they too are delving with concepts that even we deal with. As you said, marriage, election, democracy. And I really loved it, the way you spoke about the double rhetorics as applied by Anthony Giddens, and how this everyday encounters and everyday life make even the people outside the sociological genre talk more about these concepts. Now, ma'am, my question is that in this eclectic journey, where treading that line between natural science and social science becomes quite difficult, as you say that we do not make rocket, we do not make vaccines. So maybe our science to an extent doesn't appear to be that creamy or that high flying or high heeled as the natural science might require. But we social science are an integral component of the society, and without the theory of knowledge, without the sociology of knowledge, this analytical thinking, this question popping mind will not be generated. So, madam, my question is how to make social science in everyday practices, especially while teaching social sciences, especially sociology. How to make it more sharpened, more analytical, so that our scholars, our students are able to encounter the ridicules, the mockeries, sometimes faced by uh, sometimes which come from the other side, that means from the natural science periphery. And sometimes it becomes difficult for our scholars to answer these questions. Like, as you said, that democracy is a very general concept. Even we all talk about it. Marriage is a very general thing, even divorces. So, what sociology does about it? What see things or what rocket sciences do you make in social sciences? And why do you claim to be eclectic? Or why do you claim that, that charismatic status for us, for yourself, which social, which natural sciences have been doing, rather with more elan, with more difficulty, and with more complexity. I will just request you, if in our everyday practices and in teaching lessons, the modalities, the creamy nature of the social sciences, the specialization of the social sciences can be brought out with more rigor, and how the students can apply this in the real society, it becomes difficult otherwise. Thank you, madam. I don't know whether I've been able to explain my question to you.
Oh, should I respond one by one, or maybe I could collect some questions, Professor Mohammad?
No, ma'am, you respond.
Dr. Trivedi, I can wait, right?
Okay. Maybe all the questions, ma'am. Then finally you can respond.
Yeah, one more question if someone wants to ask. Anyone?
Yeah, it's not a question, but in my observation, I would like to congratulate Professor Maitrayee, for this wonderful, enriching and enlightening lecture. One thing is justifying that why do we need sociology? It's very important that, this is what it is justifying, because many a time you are encountered by this question. And sorry, I missed the name of the previous person who commented, because I'm traveling. But what I gather is that, there is this, we also need to address this question of hierarchy in social sciences. What happens is that when we go to the field, we go with the assumption that we know more, and we need to teach our students in classrooms that we are going as a learner and not as a knower. So I think that's also a very, very important, component of our subject, which is very important. And that we need to, because when our students, when they go to field, they go with a certain set of what Professor Mehta said, she doesn't want to use word biases, but they do go to field. Many of us go to the field with prejudiced mind, with certain biases. But when we go to the field with an open mind, I think that sensitivity, which Professor Mehta was pointing out, would be more problematized, because after all, the subject matter of this sociology is to empathize, to understand, and to become voice. To become voice is very important. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Now you can answer.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the questions and the responses. And I think all of us as sociologists, sociology teachers have felt that sense that somehow the person who teaches computer science or engineering would be hierarchically more superior. So we are pushed to explain ourselves. And that is so it's a challenge. At the same time, I think we need to take our subject seriously because only then we can enter the debate in a more coherent fashion. That is, the knowledge that physics or knowledge which biology produces is tangible. It's a product and you use it. You produce the vaccine, you produce it, and it gets done. The knowledge which social sciences or sociologists produce is not a tangible product. We produce knowledge which then gets disseminated. It actually, so sociology, when I teach sociology, like I taught 32 years from the university, I retired. Now, what do my students do? Some of my students are journalists, some of my students are bureaucrats, some of my students are researchers, some of them are teachers, some of them are working in NGOs. They're working in a variety of professions, So what is important is to realize that the knowledge, the role of sociology teachers and universities is to produce and disseminate knowledge towards a more just and democratic society. The point that you mentioned about when we go into the field, we have to be a little more reflective and we open that they look at the world maybe differently. It's not just true about our going to the field, but also the fact that we need, sociology means or social anthropology began with the study of the other. We need to move out of our particular boundaries. So if I meet somebody from another community, I get to know from them what kind of food they eat, what is their family practice, what are their beliefs. This encounter does what in anthropology is called defamiliarizing, then we also look into our own society and say, okay, in our society, we do it differently. This is actually seems very simple, but is extremely educative. Extremely educative. Otherwise, we get caught in our own world. So, university, which is supposed to be a universal, where you encounter difference. In fact, the idea of liberal education, which a lot of private universities now use, liberal education is the idea of to acknowledge differences, to be critical, to be tolerant. It is key to liberal education. And that is only possible when we study others and study ourselves. It is very difficult because it is, in a certain sense, so simple. We don't have a H2O formula. We have to explain it through dialogue, method, theory, interrogation. And an example of common sense, and which I think Srabanti was mentioning, and sociological knowledge, I'll give you one example. I often used to use it in my class. That supposing your mother of young women tells you don't go out at night, it's risky, it's dangerous. And I would ask, is this information wrong? And people would get confused since I'm a woman and I'm asking this question. And I said, it's not wrong. It is practical. And common sense is practical. They will tell you, avoid this. Jhagra mat karo, adjust, practical knowledge. Keep your boss happy. That's how it works. It is practical knowledge. But whereas sociological knowledge is critical knowledge. Why are the streets dangerous? Why is it risky for a woman to go? Whose owners? And I keep giving the example of Rokia Hussain Sultana's Dream, which is about lady land. It's a dream, and this whole society is run by women. And the men are in Parda. It's a satire. And in the dream, the person who's gone into Ladyland says, aren't you cruel? Why have you locked up all the men? Isn't that cruel? And the answer is, look, suppose a dangerous animal escaped from the forest and started attacking everybody, then will you lock up the lion or will you lock up all the people? Now, that is not common sense. That is critical. In her case, it was a utopian vision. So the distinction between common sense and sociological knowledge is not between right and wrong. It is about practical, taking the given as taken for granted, and a more interrogative question, why does it happen? We ask questions, why? What happens? And I think that's the more fundamental. And examples are very important. Examples are really important to explain, the sociological perspective. So I think we can, and I think my whole intent to have these series, and I'm so happy, Professor Mohammad, that you've begun it, is that you generate a conversation. It is from a conversation that you start thinking in a particular way. Thank you very much.
Will you be answering to other questions also, or it is taken care already, ma'am?
Yeah, this is fine, I think. Yeah.
Number one, ma'am. First one. I mean, Sriramulu from Hyderabad, ma'am. First one. How we can introduce sociology as a common subject for other courses, like common paper.
I think some universities do use it, as a kind of, I know there are universities because there are different, one course is open to all disciplines, right? And I know in Delhi University.
Correct, yes, ma'am. Delhi University is implementing, but others are not. So how we can...
this could be asked. Yeah, this could definitely is a very good suggestion.
Yes, thank
you. Okay. Awesome. So may I request Professor R. Rajesh, are you there?
Yes, I'm very much here.
Yes, please.
It's indeed a pleasure to meet Professor Maitrayee Choudhuri online also.
Thank you.
And it's indeed a pleasure to listening to her for almost an hour. And thanks to Professor Mohammad, who organized this session and also initiated a lecture series. It was a wonderful session which started with more than 50 participants who are live on this Zoom meeting. And Professor Maitrayee, as the president of a national body, did not confine it to any particular specific region or any of these issues. In fact, she brought out a very broader perspective of the subject and also its relevance. And that shows her commitment, and also in terms of her broader understanding of the whole perspective of where the sociology as a discipline and as a society should lead to. I have no right to sum up Professor Maitrayee Choudhury's lecture, but again, as it's a mandate given by the organizers, I would like to express in few words and also add a couple of points, which, if in case it's permitted. As Madam made it out in terms of 3 phases, in terms of relevance and theoretical dimensions, and also in terms of its locating sociology with other disciplines, it gives a very different dimension altogether, the way it originated, the way it is disseminating, and the way it has built itself, and again it is placing and locating itself in other different spheres, and both in terms of time and space. As she rightly said that sociology has played a very different role, though not recognized by many people in the pandemic and other areas of the situations. We did play a role in terms of writing and communicating and also educating people at different levels. And then at the same time, how different situations, different contexts have both excluded some of the societies and also try to be inclusive in different situations. And this we have documented at places, and also we have tried to say how we can theoretically look at it. As she rightly said that equality of quality, the word that she used in terms of equality of quality, that is, in fact, one should really work in terms of not only provide the opportunity, but also in terms of quality. Earlier, it was not being said so. But at the same time, she also said that we need to go beyond understanding the rationalization or operationalization of any of the problems. Rather, we need to go beyond the identification of the problem itself and also to go to the root cause of it. And then the very important perspective that she brought out in the second phase, especially sociology of education, the distinction between common sense and knowledge with practicality, that made a difference in terms of everybody talks sociology as a commonsensical knowledge, including sociologists. Many people do that. But then we need to go beyond that in terms of the existing theoretical knowledge and practicality, how it is changing very significantly as the material culture and again various other types of cultures are differentiated, material, non-material culture and everything. Here we are changing in a different dimension. So we need to provide those kind of understandings with evidence-based, as Professor Maitrayee mentioned it. In addition, she also mentioned in terms of how, apart from Durkheim's understanding of evidence-based empiricism, we have gone beyond the evidences which are visible through our 5 senses, but there are realities which are beyond senses. And there are certain hidden and again, certain things which are latent, but it needs to be brought out by sociological knowledge and insight, which is absent in most of the disciplines like management's perspectives or even natural sciences also. And only a sociologist can make the difference. And that's what she highlighted upon. Though in the third phase, she said that though we cannot come out with any rocket science or vaccines kind of a thing, but at the same time, we are making a difference by saying that rockets are meant for society. Vaccines are meant for society. And after pandemic, now we are all facing the different effects of vaccination and again the different effects of rockets as well. And it is time for us to say that we matter a lot, not by again offering any paper or commonly job opportunity kind of a thing. We should make our presence felt by saying that we matter not just in terms of knowledge or theoretical dimensions, but we matter in terms of every aspect it has an impact on society. To add some of the views which others also raised in terms of Sriramlu, Dr. Srabanti, and also Dr. Arvind Ansari, many of you just raised these questions, but again, I would like to add one perspective or probably some of my views. Earlier, we were told to understand science from the common sense perspective, and then it had moved on to, in terms of practicality, the street smartness. Somewhere, Professor Choudhuri mentioned that, why don't we talk of the house smartness? I'm bringing out this particular point of house smartness is basically because when a woman after marriage goes to a new house, she is smart enough to handle different challenges at every point of time. It's never documented. And she is smart enough to handle all sorts of challenges, all sorts of entities and other things. It is not documented anywhere. So if these kind of things which are so very, very important have been left out, we can move from common sense to street smartness to house smartness. And again, a housewife smartness or a woman smartness. As while responding to these responses, Madam also mentioned that locating women in house, work and street, these locations are not easy for any woman to address every day. And every mother also definitely says that you have to have eyes all over the body. So that makes not only to be cautious, but at the same time, she can also be offensive. One word, last word I would like to add here is, we have been told and given to understand it's a lion chases the deer and buffalo. And we always understood that they are a prey for the predator. But now we are seeing a different video where the same deer, either in single or group or buffalo, have started killing the same lions and tigers. We have never told that. So we had Durgas and Durgis at the same time. We had not documented it. So I'm not comparing it in terms of killing the lion kind of a thing, but then there are several knowledges which are existing, as Professor Maitrayee Choudhuri mentioned it very clearly, that we need to document many of these things in a different way altogether, not by again understanding the knowledge that is already given to us by some of the acontextual knowledge originated, either from European context or any other context, but contextualizing sociology in Indian perspective matters a lot. I think many words have been told by Professor Choudhuri, and it is definitely an insight for us. And again, we'll definitely reflect on most of these issues. Thank you very much, Professor Choudhuri, for having given a wonderful lecture. Thank you very much. Professor Mohammad, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank
Professor.
you.
Wonderful coming up. Thank you very much. Now I think
Uh,
it's time for Dr. Mosam to intervene.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. It's a very formal vote of thanks, but still I have to do this kind of duty. First of all, I'm very thankful to Professor Maitrayee, and it is really very thoughtful, enlightening, and provoking your lecture. And we actually really very enlightened by your lecture, and I hope everyone like me feels so. I like to thank all participants who are joined today and sharing their views and listening very carefully. I really thankful to Professor R. Rajesh. He really very briefly talk about the whole lecture. I special thanks to ISS Office Secretary Binu Weifi. Maybe I pronounce Binu for the whole technical support. I also really thankful to Professor Mohammad who organized such event. So I hope everyone enjoy the session, and we'll see you soon again, this kind of lecture again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.